Hello everybody, my name is Martin Carrolchick. I'm Research Information Administrator at University of Oxford.
And I'm David Saunders, Research Information Manager at University of Oxford.
And we'll be talking to you about our experience. Sorry, you can hear me now? Fantastic. So we're going to be talking to you about our experience of implementing the Discovery module at Oxford. I'll kick off the first half giving you a little bit of background, a bit of context, and I'll hand over to Dave to talk about the implementation in a bit more detail, a bit more technical detail. I'm torn between wearing my glasses and not, and reading and not, and all sorts of things. But we'll kick it off and see if I switch between the two at times. So our implementation of the Discovery module is known as Research at Oxford, and this is how it looks, this front page of our Discovery module. We launched it last February, and it's internal for staff use only at the moment, for people to explore and find research activity and researchers at Oxford. So it's internal only at the moment. Essentially, once you've added a search, the user search bar, and added a search term, Discovery modules, perhaps you know, will return a list of researchers. And here we have a list here that you can also filter using the various options on the left-hand side to refine the list. And then you can focus in on a particular individual. So these are just little snapshots of what we've done at Oxford. But our story of getting here is quite long, and we hope our reflections will be valuable to any of you who are also thinking about implementing Discovery at your institution. The University of Oxford's Research Finder project, which we kind of affectionately called ORF, started around 2015, so it's been going for some time. And prior to that, the interest in having such an application probably stemmed from about 2008. So it's been a long-standing kind of wish to have an online research finder of this type. The scope of the final project was to build an online search and discovery tool that would make it easier for internal audiences to discover Oxford's research. The intended benefits were really fourfold in the main. For research activity and researcher profiles to be highlighted, become much more visible than they are. To enable research and research facilitators to easily find other researchers and across departments. That's an important thing, across departments, not just within departments, of course. And provide a starting point for identifying and building research collaborations for people who want to do that across the university. And finally, to support the development, perhaps, of bids for funding. Two aspects I wanted to cover is that kind of knowing what research is happening at Oxford can be incredibly difficult because of two things: its size and its very devolved nature. The slide here just gives an indication of the scale of the organisation. It is very large. And anecdotally, you'd hear many stories of researchers discovering colleagues doing the similar research that they didn't know were there in the university. They'd meet them at dinner parties or wherever, but it was always by chance. So the option to have something that was more structured to support that discovery is crucial. But perhaps it's not surprising because there are over 14,000 people working at Oxford. And this is an important part. I think we're giving you this context, not say, hey, we're so big, but it is part of our story. And I think it's something that you might like to consider if you're thinking about implementing Discovery. The other aspect of that is the very devolved nature of Oxford. The previous slide showed the overall organisational structure. And as it's quite interesting, having sort of listened to the talk so far, particularly from Sam about the group structure, this is a snapshot of just the social sciences division at Oxford. So it's not the largest division, it's the third largest division, but this is a representation of the 15 or so departments within it. And you can see that they all have their own branding, their own identity. They're very keen to have their own identity. You might not even, from one or two, recognise it being Oxford, kind of, in that sense, visually. And of course, each department has its own website and its own web profiles for each of its researchers and its members. So that's part of the context and background, of course. By developing a research finder for Oxford that could search by key term, would do two things in particular. It would allow anybody without knowledge of this structure to actually find the research that was relevant to them, and to identify staff working in the same field, irrespective of the department division that they were affiliated. A good example of that, people working in global health. Also, that might, people typically think they're working within tropical medicine, but they could be found across the university. In 2018, a project to deliver the Oxford Research Finder, ORF, was approved. And Oxford opted to use the open source software known as Vivo. And at the time, this had been used by a number of other institutions in the US and elsewhere to create a finder. The Vivo was the data aggregator and search application, whilst we were going to add the use elements as the data source for the researcher profiles, the outputs, grants, and professional activities that you see in Discovery. As we started work with Vivo, coincidentally, Symplectic started to develop the Discovery module and continued to improve. Our development with the Oxford Research Finder and Vivo was comparatively slow. We did not have any in-house Vivo expert, and we went out to the community for that. And we had a very good developer who supported us in the early stages, but unfortunately we had to replace him, which we struggled to do, and that made things quite difficult for us. And that led us to look again at Discovery as a potential replacement for the technology to replace Vivo. The difficulty with that meant an entire shift in scope from both what we agreed to do and also with the technology itself. So we had to sort of consult again and again, as we often do at Oxford, and consult again, and if you're not sure, consult again. So in April last year, we did a demonstration to compare where we'd got to with the Vivo ORF and also with the version of Discovery. The general consensus from that feedback was that the stakeholders felt that we should be switching to Discovery. That was then approved by our project board, and that's where we've ended up. I think it's fair to say the key to the decision to move to Discovery has two key points that I've recognised. Confidence in working with Symplectic and the reliability of their support, and the long-term sustainability of the Discovery module, which we didn't have the in-house expertise to continue to support an open source application like Vivo. That's the end of the context and background bit. I'm going to pass over to Dave.
Hello, so I'm just going to talk a bit about our experience of the actual implementation and what it involved. So mainly, I guess you could say it's about config. So you've got functional config, which is what filters are you going to use, the filters you saw on the left-hand side, which ones you want to show. You've got your look and feel config, which is the branding, your colour scheme, how you want to arrange things, and also quite a lot of technical config. So you've got your DNS servers and your firewall and that sort of thing. So there's quite a lot to do, but the Discovery package comes with a number of implementation meetings. So I think it's 10, isn't it, Nick? Yeah. So it actually comes with these 10 meetings. The nice thing is they're actually led by Nick, so pretty much. So that sort of was managed for us, that sort of process. And it was a very systematic process. So basically what you're doing is working through a set scheme of work. One of the aspects of that scheme of work is a very detailed configuration spreadsheet, and you're literally just working row by row, answering questions about what you want to achieve, how you want it to appear, have you done task A, have you connected B to C. So again, it was all done on Basecamp, so I don't know if any of you have used Basecamp before. It's a sort of collaboration project type tool, which we hadn't experience of, but it all worked very well. Chats, raise issues, documents, that sort of thing. What was valuable is that we could also use this meeting to raise our own issues. So we had a whole load of our project team were asking us governance things like, have you got the correct documentation for non-functional requirements and security, backup things, disaster recovery. So we had this forum where we could come back and say, yeah, as well as what we're working through, we need to know this. So we had that sort of forum was all in place to answer those sort of questions. And of course, we did have our own work to do as well. So we had to do our own user testing. We had to do our own comms, which we had to manage. Oh, there's an organisational chart. So here we put together our own user guides, our own web page, telling people what to do, which led to guides. And we very much tried to link it to use of elements generally. But overall, have to say, it was painless, straightforward and well supported. We didn't really have any crises. It was work through steps. So that was not a problem. So if that's the thing that's daunting you, I'd say, can't talk for every case, but we didn't find it daunting. Thank you, Kate. So a couple of words about the preparation we had to do, which you might want to think about and relate to your own experiences. So we had to review our group structure and the naming and relationships, which ties in with what Sam was talking about before. Not least, you can include and exclude by group. So who is included in the discovery module? You can do an include or an exclude. So we took that opportunity to really look at our group structure, dig out a bit of cruft, see if it was still relevant, check all the naming and relationships, see what was obsolete. So that was great. We had filters for our departments. Our departments are the primary groups in Elements. Now we've only got about 80 of those, but overall we've got about 400 groups, big organisation. So we took that time to sort of carefully review our group structure. And another interesting thing arose was that we use acronyms for departments. So NDM in Oxford is perfectly acceptable, perfectly understood by everyone. But looking to the future and this going external, we were aware that NDM isn't something we want to push out to the wider public. So we did another exercise to come up with a public-facing name for all our departments. And we actually wrote that to a field on the user table using a script which we run once a week to convert primary groups into an externally facing name, which is what we now use on our filters in the discovery module. So that also was a good exercise for us to go through. Lots of discussion around the main photo, which was actually quite interesting, but you'd be amazed by the philosophical discussions we got into, and was that the right type of bird flying across in the left there? But that was also a good exercise thinking about our branding and how we want to be represented. Discussion about the custom URL. We went with researchers.ox.ac.uk in the end. Which filters we wanted to use on the left-hand side. Filters can be set by a label scheme or generic fields from the organisational fields from the user table. So a lot of discussion about what did we want our users to be able to then filter by. You can do sustainable development goals, things like that. So you have the choice and you can use custom labels. Also, how best to attribute fields of research codes. So you can do a tag search, which will search on your fields of research, and we use those codes as a filter. Now, we imported them in based upon an analysis done by Symplectic, so they actually looked at our data, ran something which suggested a whole range of codes for all of our users, but we had the decision to make about how many we wanted to use in order to best represent what they were doing. So we didn't have too many, which included too much from the tail, but that we had a representative set of the fields of research. Last point, I guess, is quite important, is about privacy. So because we have a lot of our data going to downstream systems and departmental websites, we've already got privacy embedded in our systems. So we've already done our comms telling people about you can set privacy, you can hide objects, you can hide publications. People know about it. We've got our web pages and our user guides. If this was to be the first downstream system that you implement, then that would probably be something that you'd need to sit down and get all your comms and that sort of thing in place. So post-implementation reflections then, just to say, we do feel that it works, it looks professional, it it has been low maintenance, and it does so far appear to be robust. So it does sort of pretty much do what it says on the tin, which we're pleased with. We've got it linked to Google Analytics, so we can count page views. Although we're aware that it's not just all about page views. We can do some surveys. It's also about the quality of your page views. If it's a research facilitator putting together a multi-million-pound bid, that could hold particular value for you. We're particularly looking at the completeness of profile data to promote confidence in it, and we're hoping to get a sort of virtuous circle that once the data becomes better, people use the tool more, and once they use it more, then they're more encouraged to get their profile data complete. It's currently low, but not all our divisions have actually started their comms on this yet, again, because of the way that Oxford works. And we're going to be importing some profile data via an API script. So when our medical science division gives us a whole load of profiles from their existing CMS, we're going to import them, and the completeness of our profile data will hopefully go up to 60-70%, which we're looking for. Finally, just a word about sort of opportunities. I'd like to just say really that apart from it being a discovery tool, we are hoping that it's going to become a sort of driver of elements generally in the organisation and people's use of sort of research information systems, because as we've got these downstream systems and departments use data, we know that they drive people to use elements. So really after the ref and open access, we know that having departmental websites that use elements data is the thing that gets people into elements, which we really value. So we're hoping that it's going to do the same with profiles and professional activities, which are visible on our implementation of discovery. Last word, there is a thing about profile fatigue. So we have some people say to us, this is a great system, Dave, but you now have to do 5 of these. They have to do one for the department, one for their college, one for discovery, one for media, one for commercial engagement, research groups. So we had to be mindful of that in our comms and sort of be a bit respectful. But what we're actually hoping is that longer term, this elements might become the more sort of canonical source, and that the departments that take publications will say, why don't I just take the profile stuff from elements? Why are we doing this ourselves? So really that's our hope. And we have, in the last couple of weeks, had our first department who are saying, look, we'll just take this profile data via the API and populate our department stuff with it. So that's it. Is that okay?